Now at 11, 3 kids pulled from a house of horrors. What we've learned about the aftermath of a double murder in a quiet Loveland community. Plus,
I'm going to lose everything I have, for sure, but it's better than losing my life.
Chaos in Kentucky. Historic floods claim more than a dozen lives as rescuers desperately search for survivors. And happy birthday, Colorado. We're helping you plan for Monday's Colorado Day deals. Thanks for joining us on Denver 7 News at 11. I'm Jessica Crawford. We're following 3 big developing stories at this hour. 3 children were rescued from a murder scene in Loveland. Police say they were hiding in a house where 2 other people were killed. It's not clear how the kids are doing or how they're related to the victims. Police say that the gunman fled to Erie and killed himself. Also happening now, Fort Collins police are looking for this 15-year-old attempted murder suspect. Officers say Tegan Pixley Johnson shot a man he knew several times yesterday afternoon. And in Aurora, a gas leak is now capped after an early morning fire at this apartment complex. 1 person was hospitalized with life-threatening injuries. No one else got hurt. Now here is a live look from our camera on Lookout Mountain. Really a gorgeous day out there, but we are seeing some cloud cover and maybe some rain on the way for neighborhoods this afternoon, but nothing like those storms that we saw earlier in the week, Lisa.
No, fewer storms expected, and as we head into the weekend, things are going to dry out too. You can see here on satellite and radar where we still have a little activity out east. In fact, there's been some pretty good rainfall just south of I-70. They're closer to Burlington and Lyman, but here in town, nice to get some sunshine, a return of that sun here in town. Beautiful temps too, low 70s at this point. The winds are calm. We're going to see a nice warm up here between now and about 4 o'clock. We'll go from low 70s now to about 80, 82 degrees between 1 and 2 o'clock. So we're still a far cry from our normal high, typically right around 90 as we get to the end of July and into early August. So it's going to be below normal, but extremely pleasant out there. Boulder, high of 80 today. Denver, 82, 78 in Parker, near 80 in Aurora. Now we will still see a few storms today. We'll take a closer look at the timing of that and where we could see a little severe weather coming up in just a few minutes.
Lisa, thank you. After 2 to 3 days of heavy rain in some areas, it might not take much more rain to create flooding later. Boulder is the #1 flood risk in the state because of how close it is to the mountains. It's also an older city developed in the late 1800s. That's before modern floodplain regulation, and it has been trying to play catch up. One of the worst years for flooding in the city was 2013. The city has completed a number of flood projects since then.
There are a lot of drop structures on the creek, which is where there's large rocks placed all across so that the water kind of falls in a step fashion to control the velocity of the flow and erosion potential. The 2013 flood was so extreme that it moved those big rocks that were the size of cars.
Wow, and right now, those with Boulder utilities are completing their flood master plan, which covers the next several decades and lays out how they're going to fund and prioritize their projects. Breaking news, now 16 people are confirmed dead from flooding in Kentucky. In some places, the water has receded, revealing the force of the water and the scope of the damage. Buildings just pushed over, roads are washed away.
Everything's gone, like everything is gone. The whole life is gone.
It's very devastating seeing the house you grow up in, get washed away.
For people who can't get out on their own, helicopters and boats are now going out into some of the hardest hit areas.
We've got folks now that we can't get to. They've got water in their homes and they're trapped, and we just can't get to them because the water is so swift.
And that's not the only area seeing severe weather. Overnight, there was more flooding in St. Louis, and parts of Las Vegas were pounded with rain as well. Rescue crews had to pull people from cars near the Strip. Now to the urgent push to get Americans out of Russian custody. A top Kremlin official now says he's open to the idea of a prisoner swap. ABC's Faith Abube has more.
Right now, a high-stakes phone call between Secretary of State Antony Blinken and his Russian counterpart in the works. It's part of the diplomatic effort to try to bring Americans Brittany Griner and Paul Whelan home from Russian prisons. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov now apparently open to discussing the possible prisoner swap the U.S. offered weeks ago and publicly revealed this week. Secretary Blinken asking to speak with Lavrov about what the U.S. is calling a substantial offer. In response, just yesterday, Lavrov's spokesperson saying the Russian diplomat would, quote, pay attention to this request when time permits. But just hours ago, Lavrov appearing to change his tune, saying he plans to propose a time to discuss the possible prisoner exchange because, quote, it would be interesting to listen to Blinken's proposals.
The irony here is that while the White House went public with their negotiating stance, in an attempt to speed up the negotiation to get Ms. Griner home, I think it may end up delaying her release and backfiring on the White House.
The Biden administration has declined to detail the proposed offer, but ABC News has learned U.S. officials are trying to exchange U.S. prisoner and Russian arms dealer Victor Bout for Griner and Whelan.
I'm cautiously optimistic that the Russians, whatever the offer is, the Russians will take it.
The family of American teacher Mark Fogel, who's serving a 14-year sentence in Russia on drug charges, disappointed he's not part of the current offer.
And he needs to be part of this deal.
And it's still unclear how quickly these diplomatic talks could happen and if and when Russia will actually agree to the offer. But the White House says the issue of Americans detained abroad is a priority for President Biden. In Washington, Faith Abube, ABC News.
New at this hour, Moderna says it secured a $1.7 billion contract to supply the U.S. with Omicron-specific booster shots. The White House hopes to roll out those shots in September. Omicron subvariant BA.5 has become the most dominant strain in the U.S. and much of the world. And new at 11, COVID vaccinations will be available at the Aurora Public Schools Back to School event. It's next Saturday, August 6th at the Town Center at Aurora. You can register your student, meet school staff, and learn more about community resources to support student families. Denver Public Schools will start paying paraprofessionals at least $20 an hour starting next month. Paraprofessionals provide support to classrooms. The district plans to increase the minimum wage for all employees to that rate by the 2024-2025 school year. One of the things school districts are preparing for behind the scenes is how to respond to students who don't show up to school. Today's Justice with Jessica segment is about truancy, and I found out skipping school has real consequences for Colorado kids and parents. Playing hooky is no game in Colorado.
A lot of it actually contributes to what we know as the school to prison pipeline. And that is the overall consequence when you think of truancy.
Nicole Duncan is a defense attorney. She says in Colorado, a child is habitually truant if they have 4 total days of unexcused absences from public schools in a month or 10 or more unexcused absences in a year. Kids aren't the only ones who can get the blame for their excessive absences.
A lot of the onus of what happens in truancy court can actually be on the parent.
Before the issue rises to that level, schools will try to reach out to parents first.
In the earlier ages, they're getting phone calls when kids are absent from school.
In Colorado, if a school finds a child is habitually truant, they have to develop a plan to improve the student's attendance. If the student doesn't comply with the plan, the district has to give parents written notice that they'll go to court if the habitual truancy continues. If the student doesn't comply, the district will file a petition as a last resort. From there, the court will enter an order requiring the child to go to school. Meredith Vatseas is with Denver Public Schools. She says when kids are skipping class, it's time to talk.
What's going on for you? How is school going? Do you feel connected? Why are you not going? What are you doing otherwise?
Attendance is especially important as schools strive to get back on track amid the pandemic. In the 2021 school year, the truancy rate at Denver Public Schools was 8.4%. The year before the pandemic, it was 5%.
Families who are already impacted by a multitude of barriers, we know that was only compounded by the effects of COVID.
The effects of skipping school can compound too. Truancy is seen as an early warning sign for educational failure linked to suspension, expulsion, or delinquent behavior, and ultimately dropping out. If the court's attempts to get a child to go to class don't work out, the child and the parents can be found in contempt. The child could have to do community service, or in extreme cases where an ankle monitor or be placed in a detention facility for 2 days. Parents could be fined or jailed. These are absolute last resort options, and schools do what they can to try to avoid them. It's day 3 of Broncos training camp, and our Denver 7 sports team is there and just tweeted out this photo of the fans watching from Dove Alley. Denver 7 is your home for Broncos training camp, and we'll have special coverage of tomorrow's session, which is called Back Together Saturday, a league-wide event. Requires free tickets, and they're all reserved now. Your best seat access to the action is right here, starting at 7 a.m. Tonight's Mega Millions jackpot is now worth $1.2 billion. It is the second largest jackpot in the history of the game. And if someone wins tonight, the cash value option will be worth $648 million. Plus, you don't have to be rich to appreciate all that our state has to offer. A look at the cool freebies coming Monday for Colorado's birthday.